The first question is from Adar Zalukovic. This one is actually left over from last week's mailbag, I think, came in after we finished recording, so I promise we'd take it today. Adar says, hey, what are some of City's weaknesses that we can exploit? It seems like there are no flaws.
I always think, look, I haven't seen them play all that often this season, so I'm no expert on their playing style or anything like that. But it's always seemed to me that transition defense has always been an issue for Guardiola's teams, mainly because they always rely on having so many players trying to control the tempo of the game and all that. So as soon as they turn the ball over, if you're able to escape the first line of pressing, at least sample size when Real Madrid have played against Guardiola and even some other teams, shows us that they tend to struggle in transition defense. I'm not sure if this is the case for this year's version of Manchester City. I haven't seen them play all that often. I will catch some of their games before the tie, but I don't know why this version of Manchester City should be different than last year in this regard. So I have to assume that they will and should struggle some defending counterattacks if Real Madrid are able to go through their first line of pressing.
Yeah, that's all correct to me. I think the answer to like what are Manchester City's weaknesses are kind of the same that any Pep Guardiola team ever has had. Their weaknesses are pretty much easy to scout in that they don't have many, but they do suffer in transition. So the best thing to do is to take advantage of the space and the high line that they keep. So how you do that is basically how well can you play out of the pressure. And as we know, the horror show from 3 years ago, I think it was, where we went to the Etihad during the pandemic in an empty stadium, and we could just not pass the halfway line, that was a huge problem, right? Now I think we're better at that thing, and also instead of Hazard, we have Vinicius, who is much better. But so there are those advantages. I think compared to last year, I don't think their weaknesses are different. The main difference from last year to me is that, I mean, they have a slightly different system in that lately they've gone without traditional wing backs and they've gone with 3 at the back. But the main difference is obviously Erling Haaland. That doesn't take a genius to know that. Carlo Ancelotti spoke about it today. And I mentioned this in previous podcasts, that the margin of error to me is actually less this year against them than it was last year. Because now all the chances that maybe they miss or they underperform their XG will fall to Erling Haaland, who is maybe, I mean, I don't even know if it's maybe, I think he's the best goal scorer in the world. And so there's the margin of error is less, not only this year, but also than any other opponent we face this year. This will be the biggest test. One more thing I wanted to say about this, and then we can move on to the next question. In the London podcast, after we finished recording the podcast, the Champions League game started, Bayern against City, and the bar got packed, and everyone was watching the game. And shout out to Howard, our new patron, if you're listening to this. Howard kept pointing out to me that, look, like that those Bayern chances where they keep running in behind the fullbacks, that's where we can give the balls to Vinicius and Rodrigo. And I think that's true. While I think they will have good coverage, even without their traditional wingbacks, there will be space to exploit. They do want us to press them so that they can exploit us. So we kind of already know what is comfortable for them and what is not. And I think that they can be made uncomfortable with the pressing, but I think the pressing will have to be very strategic and probably will be saved towards the end of the game when City ran out of energy. Like, this is something Carlo said after the Chelsea game too, where he said, we knew that Chelsea could not sustain the aggressive energy throughout the whole game. We knew that they would eventually lose energy. And I think he will look at that versus Manchester City too. Like, that's why I don't think we're going to be very aggressive to start, but we might be more aggressive towards the end of the game is my guess.
Yeah, I agree. And context will be important at the Bernabeu. I think that, Real Madrid will need to take advantage of the home field advantage, if you will. So the first leg will be very important for Real Madrid to at least avoid trying to climb up a deficit in the in the Etihad, which will and should be very tough. So the first leg is, and this is obvious, Captain Obvious speaking, but the first leg will definitely be crucial because you don't want to be in a tough scenario for the return leg at the Etihad, I don't think.
Yeah, I love remontadas, but I'm very happy if we just don't have need to have a remontada. Like, let's not get into that position where we need to have an epic comeback to remember for the rest of our lives. Let's just
on the other hand, having Manchester City, putting Manchester City in a position where they need to have a remontada or to come back or to win the game would be huge, because again, they will take the chances, they will take the risks, and you will have the opportunities to counterattack, similarly as to what happened against Guardiola's Bayern Munich in 2013-14. You know, Real Madrid got the lead on aggregate and just were able to pretty much defend and wait for counterattacking opportunities at the Allianz Arena. So that will be huge.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting, Lucas, is that I was actually surprised about how much space they gave Bayern in the second leg when they were up 3-0. And so if that's how much space they give to a really good team when they're up on aggregate, imagine how much they would have to push up if they were actually chasing the game. Next question is from Ranta. Ranta says, last season we had the best striker in the world and still needed a miracle to beat City. This season it is City that has the best striker in the world. It is not going to be even harder. Or sorry, is it not going to be even harder to beat them this time around?
Absolutely, it's going to be even harder. Real Madrid have dropped Real Madrid's best player from last season, or the world's best player from last season, has dropped his form quite a lot this season, which is Benzema. And on the other hand, they signed a player who might actually be now the best player in the world in Erling Haaland. So it's going to be, I mean, there are no reasons for me to consider Real Madrid a favorite here against Manchester City, which doesn't necessarily mean that this is obviously a finished tie before it's even started. You know, Real Madrid will have their chances. Experience will be huge. The way the veterans know how to play these games should definitely help Real Madrid in this regard. But on the other hand, if we're talking pure football, yeah, it's definitely going to be even tougher than last season, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we're not favorites, but wouldn't you argue that we're a better team this year?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
I've been thinking about this because it makes no sense to make that claim because Benzema has regressed and we're like 11 points back of La Liga. But I do kind of feel like there is a collective, I don't know, oddly, I have more confidence this year than I did last year. Is that weird? Maybe it's because, I think this is the reason why, Lucas, I think it's because Camavinga and Rodrigo have taken a leap.
True, sure.
And I think that has helped us collectively a little bit.
That's a fair point, but all things considered, on aggregate, I don't think this is a better version than last season Real Madrid. It's true that on the other hand, last season's you could see the flaws were really obvious and really the flaws were there. You know, the team didn't actually perform all that well during the whole knockout stages in the Champions League. But on the other hand, this season, how realistic and how reliable were those performances against Chelsea and Liverpool, who are in very, very poor form this season? I don't know. I think it's a similar. I think it's pretty even from last season from Real Madrid's standpoint, but City have taken a huge leap on the other hand. So it's true. You have a fair point with while mentioning Rodrigo and Camavinga, but to me, Benzema's form last season probably makes it a lesser version of Real Madrid to me.
But maybe if you get the Benzema from the first leg versus Chelsea or the second leg against Barca in the Copa, then we have to have confidence that he can pull those out again. And just look at the Chelsea second leg. Hopefully, was just a little anomaly, a little blip in his otherwise hopefully great finish to the season. I also think the Chelsea and Liverpool wins were kind of a double-edged sword to me. It's true that in some ways they skew how good Real Madrid were just because those teams are actually so bad. But on the other hand, it also gave us tremendous confidence heading into the semifinals to outscore those two teams 10-2 over 4
Yeah.
games. That's got to give us a lot of confidence. I also think one other thing is true. I can't prove this, and I'm sure Guardiola would deny it, but I think they're probably taking us more seriously than last year. Like, they're like, we can't underestimate these guys at all. Like, we can't.
I don't
I
think
feel like-
Guardiola underestimated them last season either.
I feel like a lot of people underestimated us, though. I feel like all of our opponents did, and I feel like maybe not Chelsea so much, but I definitely feel like, I don't know, it just almost felt like you saw it with PSG, where
Yeah.
they really thought the tie was over at halftime of the second leg. I think City felt really comfortable. Like, when you think about that Grealish chance that was about to go in before Mendy cleared off the line, like, nobody really thought that it was possible for them to lose that game.
True.
So I just feel like maybe they're taking us more seriously this year, but I don't know.
Could be.
Patrick Odayafadi says, "Hi, Kiyan and Lucas. I hope you both are doing well. I don't believe we can or we should play the midfield of Fede, Modric, and Kroos against City. It was fine against Liverpool and Chelsea because those teams have dropped off significantly from last year. How would you set up the midfield in particular versus City? Does Camavinga play left back ahead of Nacho or Mendy if he's fit? Also, if Camavinga does in fact play left back, then I think Tchouaméni has to play the 6 with Valverde and one of Kroos, Modric beside him. Front 3 of Rodrigo, Benz, and Vinny. I believe the only way we get through the first leg is by getting a result in the home leg. Carlo needs to choose the right lineup."
All fair, valid, and right points in my opinion. I wouldn't move away from the Rodrigo, Vinicius, and Benzema attacking trio.
Same.
That's for sure, because I think that's been clicking in all cylinders since Ancelotti has deployed it. But I will play Camavinga as a 6 in this one. I will play Camavinga as a 6 in this one, and City are very strong in the midfield line. They move the ball quickly. They are intense with their pressing. I know that this probably means that of Kroos or Modric is dropped, because I also think that you need Valverde. But I would play a pure defensive midfielder, and this should be Camavinga's spot at least in the first leg. On the return leg, maybe you try different things if you have to chase a game. But I would play Camavinga as the defensive midfielder against such a midfield and possession-oriented team like Manchester City right now. I think Real Madrid will need it, because they will most likely have to work really hard to recover the ball from Manchester City's midfield all throughout the tie, and that's definitely not Kroos' best strength as a player.
So would you go with Mendy at the left back position?
If fit, yes.
Keep in mind that it's possible that Nacho will have to play center back if Alaba can't return in time. So you go.
All I'm hearing is that Alaba should definitely be ready to play the first leg, unless
which I assume is the case too. But I guess I'm worried because remember last year he was rushed back, and then he was subbed at halftime, right? Something like that. Yeah, man, this is going to be make or break for Rudiger too. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a huge point in the season of Rudiger and how we assess him, fair or unfair. We're going to look at him in this game, how he's going to perform. I don't think
so. I think he's done enough in recent months for me not to rely on this specific matchup against City to grade his season or his signing. Oh,
for
yeah,
you, yes,
for
not for Marca and us and fans.
Right.
But I think, I made this point before that Militao, I compared Haaland to Lewandowski in some way, although Haaland is a better player now. Mm-hmm. But I just remember, like, every Clásico this season, Militao has completely locked up Lewandowski. And that's why I also looked at, not only because how great he's been this season, but also just, helping contain Haaland. Militao's a big loss, and I'm really looking to see how Rudiger does. If you remember last year in the Bernabeu, even though Benzema scored and Rudiger slipped at the end, Rudiger did a great job on Benzema last year at the Bernabeu in the second leg. So I'm looking at him. I'm looking at him as a key player in that
he
first
will,
leg.
Without Militao, he will be the most physically ready defender to stop Haaland, because neither Alaba nor Nacho, I don't think you should expect them to have success against Haaland in this regard. You know, from a power perspective, from a burst of speed, acceleration perspective. So Rudiger will be the key matchup in this regard, which also leads me to say, you know, we've been praising Militao, and for the right reasons, all season long. But what about him getting that stupid yellow card 24 hours after stating that he's a more mature player, focusing more on not making these crazy and quote-unquote stupid mistakes? Man, that yellow card was painful for me to watch.
It happens, man. I mean,
I know.
It
shouldn't happen, though. It shouldn't happen, though.
I know, but I feel like it's like one of those things that are really hard to do because you're kind of in between psychologically. You're in between like playing it safe, but also making sure you're not playing to avoid a yellow card, because you also want to go into challenges hard and stuff. I'm sure it's a difficult place to be in mentally, but I just did want to make another point about Patrick's question about like the lineups and stuff and where Camavinga plays.
Would you play Camavinga as a defensive midfielder? You haven't touched on that.
I personally believe that Camavinga's best position is central midfield, but like it's weird. I have a really difficult time answering this, Lucas, because personally I believe that there are 3 people who have to start this game and every game: Camavinga, Fede Valverde, and Rodrigo. And obviously, we know Vinicius and Benzema have to start too. That's 5 players. So then that leaves one more position for Tchouaméni, Modric, and Kroos. And that's a tough decision to make, because I actually really believe Tchouaméni is needed in this game too. And to kind of accommodate all these players, I feel like Camavinga almost needs to play left back. So I personally would look at something like Tchouaméni, Fede Valverde in midfield, and one of Modric and Kroos.
Camavinga on the left.
Camavinga left back, yeah.
Even if Mendy's fit.
Yeah, because I feel like Mendy's not in rhythm if he's fit.
Right.
That's what I'm concerned about.
What if he come back? What if he comes back next week and has a chance to play? I don't know, 2 games before
sure. Yeah, I guess then I can change my mind. Depends on how he looks, I think. Last year, Mendy at least had rhythm, and that's why he played
fair.
so well.
Fair.
And I don't know like what he looks like at this stage. Is he healthy? Is he 100%?
Fair. Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm not entirely convinced of this matchup being a good matchup for Tchouaméni, for this version of Tchouaméni.
I think
he's been slow getting rid of the ball. Distributing the ball quickly will be a huge factor against this version of Manchester City. I'm not sure. This is why I tend to pick Camavinga ahead of him. Maybe, I mean, you will also, assuming Alaba gets in rhythm, you should have the opportunity to play Alaba, Rudiger, and Nacho, with Carvajal obviously on the right back, and then Camavinga as a 6. That will obviously leave you with the necessity of playing Vallejo off the bench if something happens to each one of the defenders.
Well, if that happens, then it's not going to be Vallejo, bro. It's going to be like Tchouaméni will come in and then Camavinga goes left back or something.
Possibly, something like that. Yeah, possibly. But again, this is not the right context and the right scenario I would throw Tchouaméni into. This version of Tchouaméni, who has lacked confidence, he knows he's in the spotlight of the media and all that. Nightmare situation for him, in my opinion, right now with this version of Tchouaméni. I'm not talking about peak Tchouaméni or the best Tchouaméni we've seen this season, or Tchouaméni full of rhythm, confidence, and momentum. But this version of Tchouaméni, nightmare situation for him, I think.
There's also a question of if it's Nacho or Mendy at left back, that's fine defensively, but how much is Vinicius going to need Camavinga's help on the left side? And that's another big question. But maybe Ancelotti doesn't care about that until it's an emergency and he needs attack to score goals.
Yeah.
I still feel Carlo will go pretty conservative, is my guess.
Me too. Even if Mendy isn't fit, right now, if I were to guess right now, I don't think Camavinga will play as a left back on the first leg. I don't think so. I think Nacho and Nacho will be deployed there with or Alaba, whoever, I don't know, possibly Nacho, in order to play Alaba and Rudiger in the center. But definitely very important decisions, all very important decisions for Ancelotti to make. The midfield of Kroos and Modric, or introducing a pure defensive midfielder, and also the defensive line. All very, very, very important and huge decisions that could very well decide the outcome, not only of the game, but also of the entire tie.